When they try to treat China as the main enemy in this document, National NSS, National Security Strategy, in my opinion, is somehow accelerating the very multipolar world that the United States is trying to prevent. And the other outcome of that would be that, the dollarization. If the dollarization succeeds, can the United States national security built on treasury finance military spending survive without its global free lunch?
Well, that's really what the national security plan is all about. The question is, they acknowledge their de-dollarization. They acknowledge that the U.S. can't control the whole world, and there's really going to be a sphere of influence group. The U.S., Russia, China, Japan is not going to be in there. What the U.S. can secure is a captive Europe, although it points out, as Richard said, that Europe is pretty much falling apart, and Latin America. The U.S. wants to lock in Latin America and at least its supply of raw materials and oil. And it can, even with the division of the world into these different blocs, the U.S. still has a way of starting a new strategy for the Cold War. So you can look at the National Security Report as what do they do for Cold War II? And the U.S. strategy essentially has been to elaborate what its strategy has been ever since 1945, and really ever since World War I. It's to control the world's energy supply, oil and gas. For Britain and the United States, along with Holland, together have tried to do this because if you can control the world's oil and gas, that enables you to turn off their electricity, turn off their heating, stop supplying their factories with what they need to power them and add to GDP. And so the United States is still trying to isolate Russia and China from depending on Russian oil. And the United States this is what the war in Venezuela is all about. And the U.S. assertion of the new Monroe doctrine here is part of this new strategy, reviving it. And last week, you saw the policy of blowing up tankers that are carrying Russian oil and gas. There was another attempt on a Russian oil tanker yesterday. And there was also yesterday, the U.S. Armed Forces seized a tanker leaving Venezuela with Venezuelan oil. They haven't yet announced where this oil was going, but Trump says he doesn't call Venezuela an oil-producing country. He calls it narco-terrorist country. That's like calling somebody in high school a poo-poo pants. That's what the United States, for someone who we don't like, is now a narco-terrorist. Everybody's a narco-terrorist, except the United States, which is the center of the CIA-sponsored narco-terrorism trade. And the U.S. Supporters, like the former Honduran president, who Donald Trump just freed from being imprisoned for being one of the largest narco-terrorists in Latin America. So the United States grabbed Venezuelan oil, and last night, at least on Channel 7 News broadcast at 6:30, he said, well, he was asked, what are you going to do with the oil? And Trump said, well, I guess we're going to keep it. So not only are they grabbing the oil that Venezuela tries to sell to other countries to get the money to survive in the face of the sanctions that the United States is imposing on it, but Trump says we're days away from a land invasion of Venezuela. We're going to grab the oil. We're going to give it back to the U.S. oil companies is our basis, and that is going to help buttress the dollar, the balance of payments, and our ability to continue to spend money all over the rest of the world. Even though the national security strategy talks about spheres of influence, it doesn't say that, well, the United States now can reduce its military bases abroad. It calls for all other countries, especially the Quad, Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan, all to buy more U.S. arms and to create a constant threat against China and turn basically Taiwan and Japan into the new Ukraine. Are they willing to die to the last Japanese? Probably yes. Is Taiwan willing to die to the last Taiwanese? I don't think so. Philippines, perhaps, if the dictator is given enough money by the U.S. So this attempt to control oil seems to be independent of this division of the world into spheres of influence. And I didn't mention dependent on U.S. agriculture, but U.S. soybeans. But you've seen exactly that next to oil, getting other countries dependent on your food imports while using the World Bank and the IMF to block other countries from investing in their own land reform or regulating their economies to grow food crops for themselves instead of export crops. This is the second position that has led to one war after another against Latin America, starting with Guatemala. Back in 1953, 1954, when there was an attempt at land reform there, and the whole U.S. attempt to fight against the Catholic Church's liberation theology that was all about land reform, feeding themselves. This is the national security strategy is not going to come right out and said, America has one thing to offer other countries, if not industry and money, the ability to not to hurt them, to agree, we're not going to kill you, we're not going to bomb you, we're not going to do to you what we did to Chile with Pinochet and what we plan to do and are threatening to do with Maduro in Venezuela. Grab its gold like the Bank of England did and give it to the opponents of the Venezuelan government, or simply invade you and take over in our attempt to refight the Vietnam War, this time in Latin America, and maybe we'll have better success in the forests and jungles of Venezuela than we did in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. So that's basically it. Well, what can China and Russia do to oppose this? Well, for one thing, they've already tried to help Venezuela protect itself by providing it with arms. We don't know what power it's given Venezuela either to shoot down American aircraft and missiles or even to bomb the U.S. carriers and the U.S. ships that are mounting the invasion of Venezuela. Iran also is part of this triumvirate. China, Russia, and Iran. You'll notice that Iran was not recognized as having its own sphere of influence over the Near East. That's because it's such a nightmare for the United States that Iran, rather than Israel and U.S. puppets, Saudi Arabia will control the Near East, that it couldn't even mention it. But Iran has a very great response to all of this. If America's going to prevent Russian oil exports by blowing up its tanker ships, if it's going to block Venezuela's exports by blowing up its ships and invading the country and seizing its oil fields, then Iran can simply sink a ship in the Persian Gulf. That will block OPEC's ability to export its oil by sea. And of course, that is going to send oil prices soaring. And Iran's logic can be, if we can't trade. If the United States blocks us from trade with the sanctions it's done, then if it blocks us from selling our oil, then no other countries in the Middle East can sell their oil either. We'll blow up a ship, and we're not going to permit any Near Eastern oil trade unless you give us our sovereign right to export oil to whoever we want and to take payment in whatever currency we want. So I think that this is the Iranian situation, the Near Eastern situation, even the situation in Israel to act as America's proxy to conquer Iraqi oil, Syrian oil, and to threaten the other Arab oil producing countries with simple military takeover if they don't continue the oil to use their oil earnings to invest and finance the United States economy. This is all part of the whole national security strategy. I think that we're probably doing a better job of spelling out the strategy on your show than the document, the December 4th document does itself, although of course it's important just for the nakedness in which it tries to express U.S. ambitions for Cold War II without really describing what we were watching its strategy unfolding as.
Yeah.
If I could just add one thing, Nima.
Go ahead, Richard.
I thought emblematic was von der Leyen's deal with Trump. It's 2 or 3 months old now, but it was that final step in which Mr. Trump lowered the tariffs on European countries in general to around 15-16%. And in exchange for that service, an example of Michael's notion, we will reduce the damage we're doing to you, von der Leyen agreed to 2 things. Number one, that there would be a purchase in the neighborhood of $700 billion worth of liquefied natural gas as the energy source for Europe at a price which I believe is roughly 3 times what the equivalent energy cost would be if they had bought Russian oil and gas through a pipeline or by sea. And the second thing von der Leyen agreed to do was to establish a fund again of around $750 billion over the next 5 to 10 years of European money that would be invested in the United States. Now, there's a word in the English language for what von der Leyen agreed to. The word is called tribute. This is the tribute that a subordinate member of an empire pays to whoever's running the empire. It's like what Rome got from the people around it, or the Ottoman Empire at the time of its dominance, and so on. Okay, before the document of December 4th, all of this was rationalized by the politicians in Europe as a necessary part of winning the war in Ukraine and sustaining the NATO alliance. Well, the war in Ukraine is over in terms of the question of who's winning, and the NATO alliance is on its final voyage by virtue of the December 4th document. And that will actually, and that's my point, free these lousy European leaderships to take a different direction, because the direction they were going in would mean that the left-wing opposition, strong in places like Spain and France, and the right-wing opposition, strong in places like Germany and Poland, they would now have less of an opportunity to overthrow these leaders, because they would no longer be in the position of being able to make fun of them for having paid the tribute. every European country would know that its economic development is severely hobbled by what von der Leyen agreed to do. That should never have happened. And now they too have a choice. They too. You know, there's a rumor, I do not know if it's true, but there was a rumor 2 years ago that Macron asked BRICS if he could join, if the French could join BRICS, and he was turned down. Well, I think we're going to see the resuscitation of these ideas now in a way that we would not have without that document and what it puts in plain English right up there for everybody to see.